You want to test the mic? Frankie, the guy that organized the hackathon tonight, sitting in the back. Everybody needs to come to the hackathon and see what Frankie organized. Free for personal use, yes. The hackathon is from 7 to 11 tonight, but you don't have to stay for the whole thing. If you just want to kind of come and see what the hackathon is about, I'm a team captain, and we're going to hack on anybody here use RV tools? No? Anybody know? So we're gonna write prompts against the data that RV tools creates as part of the hackathon. So when people generate RV tool files and there's all this data and you have to manually go and think about what to go look for, we created some prompts that will actually go and do that for us all through the ChatGPT AI, and it's going to be part of the hackathon. Should we start? All right. Well, welcome. This session was booked full. Not all the seats are full right now. So this was my first session that actually filled up. So hopefully everybody likes the topic. A little backstory on the topic. I'm pretty involved with the VMUG. And when the free version of ESXi got discontinued, some people from the VMUG reached out to me and they're like, hey, how can we still learn about, the VMware products? And that's where I kind of got the idea to share with everybody how you can use Fusion and Workstation to install the products. If you just need to quickly stand up a VM and throw away VMs, all that kind of stuff, to use Fusion and Workstation. So that's what we're going to talk about. So this is a little bit of information about me. If you enjoy what I have to present and you want to learn more, I do blog about this stuff. When my customers come to me with questions, I'm like, hey, that's something somebody else could probably learn from. I'll write blogs, and I have stuff on, yes? Oh, she is. She's actually probably more qualified than I am. So, and I do tweet when I write new blogs and stuff. So yeah. So we're going to talk about Fusion and Workstation. You know, show you all the different options that you can do, and we're going to get into some more advanced stuff like using the APIs and the VM run and to do some of the management of it. So even myself personally, when I submitted this session, I didn't really use some of those advanced features as much, but I am now once I learned about them. And I wrote some functions and stuff to use PowerShell, and that's what I'm going to show you how some of that works. So yeah, use cases. You know, when I talk to people about having home labs, and one of my customers sent me a picture of his home lab last week. It's a freaking data center in his basement. He's got like, you know, 2 or 3 Dell hosts that were decommed and a storage array and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, dude, that's an awesome home lab. But for people that are just getting out of college, you know, maybe don't have the money to spend for that kind of stuff, if you just get a nice desktop or a laptop or even like the MacBook Pros nowadays with Fusion, you can really do some nice home lab work. So yeah, there's no need. If you want to do a dedicated ESXi host, do it. You know, it makes an awesome lab. If you don't have the dedicated resources, you know, look at this as an option. And with Fusion, you know, you can run Mac, Windows, Linux. There's an API piece that we're gonna go over. And if you just want to have something at home you're playing around, it's a throwaway. You know, if you have Fusion or Workstation installed, stand it up when you're done, just delete it. Who cares, you know? And then if you're new to virtualization, to have the GUI, if you don't want to use the APIs and stuff, there's still a nice GUI. So I still think they're 2 pretty awesome products. So if you do want to look at doing a home lab and you're like, hey, I want something a little bit more than Fusion or Workstation, but I don't want to dedicate it, you can do nested ESXi. So as long as you have a login to the website, you can download the ESXi host and do it at what they call nested, have it running on top of, you do need the x86 host, so like a PC or whatever, or an old Apple laptop that's running x86. So you do need that for the nested part. And if you're using it for home, for learning and stuff, the Pro version is now no cost. And if you want to play, if you have, I know a lot of people when they do home labs are doing the ARM versions of stuff, and then you can still get the 180 days of license on that too. If you want to do more than just the download and get to 60 days, the VMUG, and this is totally up to you, I'm not, whatever, you know, you could get the VMUG Advantage, which gives you 1 year. And then if you look at the bottom line, if you do stuff like this and you promote the products and blogging, there's a vExpert program that you can get into. They reward people that are like evangelists or people like myself that are talking, and they give you a 1 year license to all the products that you can play around in your home labs too. So yeah, you don't need to have the latest and greatest hardware to run this, but you know, my first Mac is kind of off the list because it won't run on that anymore. But you know, I have a MacBook Pro that's probably 12 years old now. I can't get updates for OS X anymore, so I put Linux on it, and then I put Workstation on it. And I use that to start up some Linux VMs. I was able to do the nested ESXi, anything like that. So, you know, the different flavors of Linux you can do. like I was saying about the Raspberry Pis, there is a version that you can do that in the home lab. And then some of the best home labs, and my customer that I was talking about, if there's any managers here or anything that you let your employees take your DCOM servers home to create a home labs, I think that's awesome. I worked at one place that they left me take servers home, and I used it all the time. So to take something that you're not using in production anymore and let your employees have it, to learn on it, I think is great. I know some places don't allow it, but if you do, I applaud you. So some use cases, yeah, like I was saying, you can do the nested ESXi. You could even put vCenter on there if you have enough memory and stuff. The ARIA appliances, if you want to start looking at operations. This morning I did a session right here on doing Management Pack Builder, and that there's another use case that you could put Management Pack Builder and operations and vCenter all in a nice hosted on the nested ESXi host. The thing that's cool about with the Macs is, you can run Windows, you can run Linux, and if you install Fusion and you go home and you go through the wizard to install the ARM version of Windows 11 on top of Fusion, it's the easiest VM install you'll ever do. It goes out and it pulls down the files that you need, it converts it over to an ISO image and does the complete install, basically next, finish. You got to do it just to experience it. And one thing, when I work with customers, my focus is operations and automation. And when I talk to customers, they're always like, hey, I never worked with APIs before. So we're going to show you that today. This is a great place that you can make API calls and learn how those calls work without maybe even, if you don't have a non-production area, I think it's a great place to learn about working with APIs. So if you've never seen, this is Fusion. So this is actually my laptop, some screenshots. I'm running Ubuntu. It's the ARM version. And I've never had any issues running the ARM version of Ubuntu. But if you have a Windows box and you're running x86, then you could do the x86 Linux too. So the Mac kind of gives you that flexibility either way. And this is running Windows 11 on top of a Mac, which is running right here. And that's why when I said about being so easy to install, you got to go through the process to experience it, really. So since this is the code theater, let's start looking at the APIs. So when you install Fusion or Workstation, in order to use the APIs, there's a little program that's running in the background, and it's called VMRest. So if you look at the top, that's running. So in order to make the API calls, and it doesn't run as a service, so you have to go in and you start that up, and then you can start making API calls. And when you're using the API piece, the one thing I wanted to call out is you don't use the GUI at the same time. So if you're going to work with the APIs, work with the APIs. If you want to work with the GUI, then work with the GUI. And then in order to work with the APIs, I don't care what you use. I'm a big PowerShell fan, but I've also have some examples where we're going to do curl. If you're big into Python or you want to use Postman and you're like, hey, I want to learn how these products work, it's a great place to learn. You do need to set up a username and password. So when you do the VMRest, if you do a -C, it'll ask you for a username and password, and then that lets you talk to it through the APIs. So that's the first thing you'd want to do when you set it up. Yeah?
Have a VMware account for this or VMware Fusion content too?
No. Nope. You can download it, and it's just, you could be in the middle of the mountains nowhere with no internet, and you can have this running. Yeah, that username and password is very specific to the API. It has nothing to do even with the computer. So when you do the VM REST, you're saying this is a username password to use with those API calls. Yep, has nothing to do as a local user. And then after you start the VM REST, they actually give you they give you this nice GUI that you can then go in and look at all the different API calls that you can make. And if you go localhost and then do port 8697, this is the web page you get. So then when you sign into that web page, you need to do an authorization, and that's where you enter that username and password that you needed to create. So then that tells this web page, hey, this is how I'm going to authenticate. And then here it shows you all your API calls that you can make. So if you want to do gets or puts or posts, if you want to delete VMs, and it lets you go through. Like if I want to go through and say, all right, show me all the VMs. This is the screen, and then down at the bottom, if we go to the next screen, you can actually do a try it now, which I would say most of the products that have APIs nowadays have something very similar to this. So if you look at this, it said try it, and I have those 2 VMs running on my laptop, and then it even shows you the curl command that you can use, and then there's your API call. It says local host 8697 API VMs, and when you make an API call against that, this is the response that you're going to get. So if you never used APIs and you're always like, hey, I'm not a programmer or something, even if you just pull up that URL in a web browser, you'll see that response. And then to take the curl command and just go to a prompt, like on my Mac, if I do that, and I show that on the next screen, yeah. So when you go to the curl command and just run that, you can see the response that you're going to get, and then that comes back as JSON. Now, if you're like, hey, I don't know curl, I'm a Windows guy, I've done this a million times already. Take that curl command and put it in the chat GPT and say, turn this this curl command into a PowerShell script, and it'll do it for you. So if you want to go between your different languages, I know we're talking about Fusion and stuff, but if you're like, oh, I don't know curl and I don't know this or that, don't be afraid to maybe ask ChatGPT for a little help too. So then, so that showed like a list. Now, if you want to know, if you're working local, you're doing programming, are my VMs powered on? So there's an API call for that. So there's the curl command, there's the request. Now I'm specifically using the ID on this one, and it shows that it's powered off. So if we go back, you can see it return the IDs. So if you grab those IDs when the JSON is returned to you, and then when you do your Power API call, you need to tell it the ID. So because you made the first call first, you can use that and say, all right, tell me whether that's powered on. So you just make an API call and give it the ID. And then there again, just go to a prompt, run the curl command. It'll show you that it's powered off. So once you start playing with the APIs a little bit and start testing, here's an example. This is a PowerShell function that I wrote, and the first thing I do when I'm using PowerShell and I want to use the APIs is I want to know, is the VM REST program running? So if you do a get process, which is a PowerShell command, and tell it that I want to only show me the processes that are like VM REST, it'll come back and tell me whether it's running or not. And if it's not running, it'll come back and say, all right, respond with, hey, it stopped, or respond with that it's actually running. And I'm gonna show that. So here, when I first I said connect, so I just called that function and it wasn't running. So I went and turned that function. I started that function. Now you can see that it came back and said, hey, it's running. So before you want to do any API calls, the first thing you want to make sure is that that program is running. So then on this function is like setting, after you make sure it's running, you want to say, hey, here's the username and password that you want to use. So I wrote a function to do that. So I can just say, hey, go set the workstation credentials, and then I pass those credentials. And then any API call that I make after that will use the creds that I set. So here you can see that I went through and I ran that function and said, hey, here's the username, there's the password, set those functions. So then they're set. Now, if you want to then start collecting information about, so we made sure the workstation API is running, we set the credentials, and now you can start doing API calls. So like when I showed you on the screen, you know, if I say API VMs, then it's going to return all the VMs. And then I go through and I grab the name of the VMs, and then I just put that into an array. With Windows 11 VMs, if you encrypt your drives, you also have to use an encrypted password, and that's what I'm doing down here. When I set the password, I went and checked, and if the drives were encrypted, you also have to encrypt the password. And then I'm, you know, this function to return all that data, I'm looking for the power, the VMs, and then I'm getting, what is it? I'm getting the ID, I'm getting the number of CPUs and memory, is it powered on? Here's the path, and then I'm also grabbing the IP number, which is right here on this line, all through API calls. So if you're new to automation or APIs, I think it's a great spot to learn how to work with the APIs. So if you notice, to get the list of VMs, then you just call those function names. So like the first one, I said get the VMs, it brings back all that information. If you want to bring it back for a specific VM, you can actually bring that information back just for that one VM. And my example, like I said, is in PowerShell, but if you're more towards Python or whatever program you want to use, you can make these same exact kinds of calls. So then once I wrote my APIs and all the functions and stuff, you know, here's some examples of what I do then is, you know, the very first one, like I said, is all right, I check, make sure it's running. I set my credentials, I can say get VM, and then I can specifically call out VMs. If the VMs aren't running, I can just do a start. So that's another function that I wrote, and then I pass it the VM names. If I just want to have every VM that I have on my laptop to start, I can just do a dash all. If I want to shut them down, I can shut them down one at a time, and that's all through the functions that I wrote. So, like I said, I think it's a nice little, everything's local, everything's running on your laptop, and it's a great way to learn about working with the APIs. Now, if you don't want to use the APIs and you're like, hey, I just want to use Workstation or Fusion just as a place to have some VMs running that maybe are a throwaway, or maybe you want to have a Linux box that's running something, there's also a VM run command that you can run from the CLI. So I wanted to show that. So if you do a VM run list from the command prompt, it'll show you every VM that's running. And then if you stop, when you start and stop VMs using VM run, you have to give the full path to the VMX file. And then you can see that I did a list, so there's 2 running. I did a stop, and then when I do the list, then you can see there's only 1 running. And you can automate that. So here you can see the very first one is list, then I can start them, I can stop them. If you'd want to do a snapshot, You can do VM run snap, give it a snapshot name. You can list snapshots. You can revert back to your snapshots, and you can delete snapshots. So if you have if you're a developer and you want to have a Linux VM running some web server or something, and you want to have some code running, you can see with just a couple lines of code, without going into the GUI, if you're in there cranking code out all day long, and you're like, okay, let's start it up, let's do whatever you want to do, and I want to snapshot it before I do anything. Give it the name, and if you want to make some code changes, you want to revert back to where you were, you can do all that through VM run. And there's, I know that's a long address for the documentation, but there's a documentation that has all the VM run commands. Or if you go out to ChatGPT, and I've tested this, you can say, act as a VMware Fusion SME, show me all the VM run commands available, and it came back with all these commands and showed me how to run them. Yeah. This is being recorded, and it's actually on YouTube Live now. So yeah, when you're done, you can go back and watch these on the VMware Code YouTube channel. And I gave my my blog site and my X address. If you want to reach out to me afterwards, don't be afraid to reach out to me, and I share a lot of this code and stuff. And I do have a GitHub repository that I can dump this code out onto and kind of help people get a good start too. And using VM run, you can also run commands local on the VMs. So if you're like, hey, running the code, you want to do some tests and go through things, you can actually copy files to and from it. You can kill processes, you can list processes. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with that. So here's an example. So what I did is I created some scripts. So I said, all right, just run it's a PowerShell script. It says, all right, list all my VMs. So then I did another script that said, hey, start up. So if you have this process that you want to do every morning, you can see that it started the VM. And this is all real time. I didn't edit the amount of time it takes. So the Linux VM booted pretty quickly. So then I went through, and I'm going to, at the end of the day, if you want to just have a script that would go through all your VMs and stop them very quickly, all through some code, you can get your environment up and running or make it terminate at the end of the day. And here's those scripts. It's just very simple PowerShell scripts. It's the same as what you would use running it from the command. I just said VM run list, VM run start, and then I gave it the address to the VMX file, and then the stop. So instead of having to type all that out, you could write some simple scripts and get that going in the morning. Anybody know what a Stream Deck is? I'm a huge fan of the Stream Deck. So what I do on my laptop, for those that don't know what a Stream Deck is, it's a piece of hardware that you can plug into a Mac or a PC, and it has buttons. And you can program those buttons to do things. So in the morning, like where I wanted to list my VMs, I can program a button, I hit that and it runs the script. Or if I want to start up my VMs, you can program these little buttons. So instead of you having even to open up a command prompt, you could use a Stream Deck. Or if you want to take a snapshot, revert the snapshot, and say there's a couple steps you would go through. Very quickly, you push these buttons, and you can start and stop VMs and revert to snapshots and take snapshots and do all kinds of cool stuff. And I'm a big fan of the Stream Decks. And the other thing that you can do when you have Fusion or Workstation running is if you have a ESXi host somewhere in your environment, it could be running on the same computer, or maybe it's a dedicated computer, you can connect to an ESXi host with Fusion or Workstation, and it'll show you the VMs that are running and give you a little bit on the memory usage. Here's your data store, and you can start and stop VMs through the GUI. So, I always with vMug, I always want to help people that are just getting started, like I kind of said at the beginning of this talk. So if you don't want to or don't have access to vCenter and you only have a ESXi that you can get for 60 days, this still gives you a nice GUI that you can kind of get into and keep it all in one environment. So it shows you your local VMs that are running, and then connect to a host and do whatever you want to do there. And there you can see this is a vCenter running. So I have a 60-day trial of a ESXi. I'm running the VCSA as a vCenter server, and you can see that that's running inside of Fusion, that you can access it, and you could even get into the prompt and run commands or do whatever you need to do. So here's some, if you want to kind of stay in touch, here's some blog sites. That first one is mine. There's some people I work with. I'm doing a session Wednesday with one of my customers I used to work with. He has a good blog site. If you want to, keep an eye on VMUG local activities, I think that's always good to get involved with. And don't forget about hands-on labs. If there's something new that you want to learn about, and you're like, hey, I can't do Fusion or Workstation or have a dedicated server, hands-on labs is also a great place to go and learn. And it's free for personal use. And if you go out to support.broadcom, go to My Downloads, and you'll see the downloads for Fusion and Workstation. So, any questions? Yeah.
You said the credentials.
If you ask a question, you get a token for a free t-shirt over here. So, there's a token. What's okay? What was your
For the process, is that persistent?
No.
You set the credential every time you start a new terminal.
Yeah. So the question was, do you need to reset the credentials every time? And when you're working with my functions and stuff, I do have to set that every time. So that way, it stays in the memory of running the functions. If you were using something else besides like functions and stuff, like Postman or something, once you set the credentials, they would stick and be persistent. Yeah. No, it's only a username. Yeah, he wanted to know if you could do tokens for authentication, and it's only the username and password. Yeah. Yeah.
Since you use it on the Steam Deck, have you tried using it on the actual Steam game system?
Oh.
They have their own dedicated system.
No, it's Stream Deck. Yeah. What I was talking about is a stream. Sorry if I said Steam. It's called a Stream Deck, but it's Steam Deck. I have not tried that on. I know what you mean. If you could get Linux on that Steam Deck, you could maybe put Workstation on top of it. I don't know. I've never tried that. But right. If it's running Linux, yeah, I don't know.
That's the question more of with the Stream Deck, you can actually do multi-action where you stick a bunch of your
you could.
Open everything up.
Yeah, what he's saying with the Stream Deck, instead of having a button do each function, you could program one button to just say, do step 1, 2, 3, kind of go right through it. It's pretty neat. A place I use the Stream Deck a lot is if I do demos for customers and I have to type out commands and I don't want to make a mistake and act like I'm a slow typer, I'll actually get my commands programmed into these buttons and get into my demo. And when I click on the command prompt, I'm hitting off to the side, I'm hitting these buttons, and I know it's going to work every time because it's the same command. Yeah. In all the testing that I'm doing, I found that their kind of feature are the same. I would say also be on the lookout that future versions may have a better VM run coming. That's going to even give you more functionality. So be on the lookout for something in the near future there. Yeah. So he wants to know if there's anything different between Workstation and Fusion. Not that I've seen. The commands all work the same. The VM run works the same. The APIs work the same. I would say the biggest thing is the fact that the Mac is running ARM. So you got your M series processor, and Workstation is really designed for x86 running on something. So did you get a token? Lots of free t-shirts today. Yeah.
Is it possible to connect, like if you put a VMware Workstation, or is that something that has to be connected?
What was the question?
If you were to say put VMware Workstation on another computer, could you connect it remotely, or do you have to do something?
You mean through the API calls and stuff? Oh no, I mean when you make the calls, you would make a call to that IP number and call the ports and everything like I was showing, and you could do that remotely. What was that?
I'm serious, they have a new Fusion version?
Yeah, on the Mac, the latest version is 13.1, I believe it is. There is a current version. You're getting errors running that?
Still saying it requires x86.
It should recognize that it's the newest version of Fusion will run. It will run on x86 or the ARM version. It doesn't matter. So it should recognize that. Yeah.
It doesn't work on credentials, and you're trying to implement like ESXi or something like that. Will it work like using Windows OpenStack, like Active Client or something like that?
I'm not sure what that is. RSAC?
Yeah. It's like the Windows server administrative viewer.
Oh, so if you're running a Windows Server VM, you want to connect that with another manage the RSAC, that should work. I mean, when you have the VM running, if it's Windows Server or Windows 11 or whatever, it's sitting there on your laptop or desktop or whatever you have, just like any other computer on your network. So if you want to use some other management tool to connect to it, yeah, you should be able to do that.
You should integrate with GNS and stuff like that. VM or a server inside Workstation or Fusion.
GNS?
Simulator.
I'm not sure what that is.
It's a simulation of the network.
Oh, okay.
Simulating routers and switches to get and it could probably talk out all the others.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be an issue. Do you have one of these?
One other question that's
Steam Deck. You only get one shirt though.
Okay. You said it's hardware. How does it connect to the computer? Is it Ethernet or Bluetooth or wireless? You said it was hardware.
Oh, the Stream Deck? Yeah. The Stream Deck, yeah, you plug it into USB ports. Yep. And then it's magic. There is some software that you need to install, and then it'll talk to your laptop, and it's just like, you know, hitting keys on your keyboard. And Stream Decks really got popular when everybody got sent home for Zoom. There's actually Zoom functions and stuff, like taking your mic off mute and stuff. You can just have a button that when you push it, if it's on mute, if you push it, it'll take it off mute, or you can put it back on mute. And then once I understood, that's the main reason I bought it. And once I seen that I could use it for programming and automation, then I have all kinds of screens and buttons and stuff that I could show you. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep it up, and you know how you have the yearly fees, and then you get the software for the year. You build an environment, you have to continuously rebuild your environment, or you just buy another year.
If you get new, the question was the VMUG Advantage keys, right? Yeah. If you get the VMUG Advantage keys, he was asking whether he'd have to rebuild things. If you can install the new, when you get new keys, you would just apply them to the products, and then they would work. Like if it's ESXi, you would just go in and enter the new key, and then things would just keep. No, you wouldn't have to rebuild that. There is no key for Fusion and Workstation. There's no key involved. You install it, and there's no keys. And as long as you're using it for personal use, there's no charge. Yeah.
To download Fusion or Workstation from the Broadcom support portal, do you need an account?
So the question was, to download it, do you need an account? I'm going to say yes. But you don't need to. Anybody can create an account, and since Fusion and Workstation is no charge, once you create that Broadcom account, you sign into that address that I showed earlier, you should get access to download it. Either product, Workstation or Fusion. And there's no pro version and a non-pro. It's all pro now. Because there used to be two versions. And the pro version gave you some extra functionality where they kind of did the same thing they did with VCF. They're like, all right, we're not going to have two versions. You get one version. If it's personal use, it's free. You know, if you're using it for your business, then there is a charge. But yeah, it's all the same now. So did everybody get a T-shirt? Everybody? Any questions? What's that? The reason there was a part 1 and part 2, sorry, I should have said this, I needed more than 25 minutes. These sessions in the Code Theater are 25 minutes, so they gave me 2 sessions back to back so that we could have all these really nice questions and kind of go over things. So it's same topic, I just kind of kept going on. I like your hat though. Yeah. Didn't I give you a token? Sorry. Lots of shirts. Shirts for everyone. It's like going to an Oprah show here. Yeah. What's that? Question? Oh. All right.
I wasn't here for the first half.
All right.
So I use Workstation, which is a demo environment.
Yep.
And it's licensed. So
Yep.
I know that, you know, the university uses it. And, you know, I run like ESXi, and, you know, there's the issue of going Intel with stuff to instance cores, whether it's performance cores. Did you address like using core directives at all to kind of help you with the overall performance of the Workstation?
No, I'm not familiar with that actually.
Yeah, maybe it's just like my unique use case. Like I use like Dell stores, ESAs, and that type of thing. And it's stuff we want to keep on the performance cores. And if it goes idle, it's kind of like closing the give it up. So there's a program out there called CODE1162LV, which allows you to assign performance efficiency cores in Intel processors.
Oh, and that's a separate product?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What was that called?
CODE1162LV.
Core Director?
Yeah.
So this gentleman says there's a product that's called Core Director that will help you tell your VMs to use your performance cores and not the efficiency cores.
If you have like really high
Right.
oriented applications, like those storage.
I will look that up. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I've not heard of that. All right. Well, thanks for coming to my session. Hopefully you learned something. If you do anything really cool, send it to me. I always like to see what customers or people attending these events, if they see something I do and kind of take that and just run with it. I love to see what people are doing. And there's my my blog address if you want to follow me on X. So thank you, and fill out your survey, please. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yeah, just an interesting thing. I've got a beefy notebook, and I've got a 6-node vSAN cluster running on the notebook. Yeah, with the ESA, a lot of like beam environment, doing backups for beam, all in the notebook. That's great.
And if you attended this because you're interested for home labs, you need to go read William Lamb's, one of his last blogs, where he talks about taking those Intel NUCs, like are over here in this lab. You can take an Intel NUC and add a NVMe drive to it and do what they're calling tiered memory. So where NUCs used to max out at 64 gig, if you had like a 500 gig NVMe and say use that for memory, now in your home lab, you can run a lot of stuff. So where the limitations, like even myself, I would put a NSX or a ESXi nested. I would run vCenter. I could put operations in a couple products. But when it came to do ARIA automation, I always fell short. So if you would do that tiered memory and have that set up, go read his blog. I think it's going to change how you might look at home labs now. And for you to do demos, if you could take a little NUC with you and have, instead of worrying about, hey, go use this core and have, a terabyte of memory for all those VMs that you might demo, take a look at that too. I know we're here to talk about Fusion and Workstation, but that kind of changes for home labs. I just want to help people to learn. So whether you use this or not, or if you're going to take a look at a NUC or something, I don't care. Just, take the time, go learn the products, and let me know. Thank you.